like last week, we had a ton of players that you guys had questions on, so I'm throwing up a long form video here. We'll start off with Bucky Irving, who I talked about before. He had a shoulder subluxation. He also has that midfoot sprain. They said the shoulder subluxation is a little bit more of an issue. People have been saying that he throws up Bible quotes all the time, so maybe it's not that big of a deal that he threw up that pretty emotional Bible quote saying, a lot of tough battles and all that, but I'm still a little bit concerned. He's out for at least 2 weeks, so that means week 6, week 7, so possibly return on week 8, but I still am a little bit concerned about this. So if you get some really good trade offers for him, I would be considering moving Bucky Irving. Brock Bowers, we talked about this before, how he's got that bone bruise, so I would definitely expect him to sit this week. Might be sitting next week. Travis Kelce in 2023 missed only about a week with this kind of injury, PCL/bone bruise. I talked about it before on Instagram, TikTok in a more detailed video if you want to check it out. Aside from that, let's talk about Terion Arnold from a Lions fan. So Terion Arnold has been ripping it up, but he has this weird shoulder injury, which initially they were saying that he might miss the entire season for. And then he got a second opinion, and he is not going to miss the entire season. He might miss a month. So it's kind of confusing about what kind of shoulder injury this is. They said it was an aggravation of a previous injury, but I did a lot of deep diving. I wasn't able to find out what specific injury that would be. Hypothesizing he could have had a shoulder subluxation where they have that Bain-Carter-Hill-Sachs lesion, which we talked about, like a chip off of that socket that the humerus stays in. They might have said maybe you need surgery or a significant labral tear with a lot of shoulder instability, but now they could just be watching it, seeing how the shoulder calms down after the inflammation, and hopefully pushing off possible surgery. Another thing it could be is an AC joint sprain where the ligaments actually got torn. You are able to play through that in a lot of situations, and that would be my assumption in terms of a shoulder injury that they were thinking might require surgery. If it was a clavicle fracture, he'd be out way longer than that. If there was any kind of humeral fracture, he'd be out way longer than that. Maybe a partial thickness rotator cuff tendon, that would be possible as well, like a supraspinatus tear. So the rotator cuffs are these 4 tendons that encompass the shoulder joint and help abduction, adduction, shoulder stability and strength. So what about Saquon Barkley? Saquon Barkley has this knee injury that popped up. Reports are saying that this is just soreness, and he does plan on playing this week. So we haven't gotten a practice report out this week. If he misses, Wednesday, then I still wouldn't be that concerned. I would think that he's still going to suit up. But if he's missing Wednesday, Thursday, with how he's been playing, he's probably a little bit limited. Realistically, he won't miss Thursday because they're playing on Thursday. So, I wouldn't be surprised if he is very limited tomorrow. I think he should play. But the worst thing is that you switch to your alternate because he's playing on Thursday. But overall, I don't think it's a long-term thing. We have Brenton Strange. So the tight end feels purgatory right now. I know it sucks. And I do expect a little bit of an absence for Brenton Strange. We saw it was a non-contact injury with his leg extending outward. He kind of bent over, touched his leg a little bit. So it seems like a hip flexor injury. When those are non-contact, we usually expect a little bit of a recovery period there, just because we've talked about before, the tendons extend pretty deep into the muscle, and they just require a little bit of recovery there. So I'd expect about a 1 to 2 week absence for Brenton Strange. Aside from that, Mclaurin, there's some positive reports that he might return this week, so that would be great. I do think he's going to be limited these couple weeks. He is another player who had a surgical evaluation. I think that he had a sports hernia, which is basically one of those muscles turns into a tendon and attaches right at the pubic bone. Can get injured, and it heals back pretty poorly. Usually it's a surgical injury, but they can sometimes push it out where they don't end up operating on it. I would expect him to be limited though, even if he's active this week. So I would look for alternates at this point in time. I would still be considering trading him just because we don't know a lot about what this injury is, what's going on with it, and he had surgical evaluation. So I would think about trading him if someone gives you a good offer for some reason. Ceedee Lamb, he's got this high ankle sprain. And that high ankle sprain is something that usually causes a multi-week absence. He was out of the boot last week doing individual stretches, which is, great. I think that that's a really positive development. I do still think that he likely sits this week, but is back next week. He could be active this week, and, if he's active, I would start him at Ceedee Lamb. But just know that he might not put up the production you expect. Aside from that, Ricky Pearsall, he had a PCL sprain. He missed last week. He played through it the week beforehand. I think he's got a good shot of returning this week, so I would prep like that. Juwan Jennings, though, should be returning this week. He had his helmet on. He was logging pretty decent practice reps on Monday. So I think that, both of them are going to be active. They're both pretty good plays. I actually like Jennings more. He's got a better separation rate and a better catch percentage at this point in time. Aside from that, Chuba Hubbard, I think, he's got that calf injury he missed last week. It was due to him worsening his calf injury from previously. I think that there's a good chance that he sits this week still. You can fire up Dowdle again. Regardless, I wouldn't be dropping Dowdle. A lot of people are like, oh, I can't carry both Hubbard and Dowdle on my roster. You kind of have to this week. You got to drop someone else because there's a chance that Hubbard is out this week, and then Dowdle's a must start. You just saw him last week, so you can't risk dropping one of them because once Hubbard comes back, he's probably going to take back that lead cow role. So, other than that, George Kittle, he didn't have any setbacks. Initially, they said he's got a chance of returning back week 6, but it looks like it's going to be week 7 based on recent reports. Good thing is that I think he's still going to be a stellar player when he comes back. Hamstring injuries, they do well once you rest them appropriately, and he seems to have gotten the appropriate time period for rest. So I think that Kittle's back week 7 should be good. Taysom Hill had 5 torn ligaments in his knee, not just the ACL, 5. That is crazy. And he already came back and played last week. So, like we talked about before, there's not too many options at tight end, so he's a better option than in the tight end pool than, say, Brandon Aiyuk is in the wide receiver pool, or Godwin is in the wide receiver pool, just because there's less options in the tight end pool. So if you have Juwan Johnson or you don't even have a tight end, then pick up Taysom Hill, but I wouldn't be dropping any of your starting 5 tight ends for Taysom Hill. I don't think he's going to be that good coming back from that kind of injury this season. Brock Purdy, so he's got that turf toe. He likely will be out this week, and I would say next week too, because they got Mac Jones. He's playing fine. And if he gets injured, they have Martinez. I think they would want to rest Purdy and get him the adequate rest as they tried to return him early, and it was painful. Likely still has a mild turf toe, as they would have operated if he got significantly worse. So Purdy should be out for about 2 weeks and then come back. Mike Evans, he's been out for a couple weeks. I thought that he'd be out for close to an IR period. It looks like that's where we're at. I don't think he comes back this week, even though the Lions are hurting without DJ Reed and Terion Arnold. But I think that Mike Evans should be back week 7, and he should be a decent play. I like him. He's not really competing for positioning too much with Buka. I think they play different styles, so I think he should be a good wide receiver to high flex start. Aside from that, Brandon Aiyuk, I just go over again. I don't think he's worth rostering because he had that multi-ligament injury. They don't have a great timeline for his return. And, we've just seen him running a straight line. So I'm not too optimistic on him being relevant for fantasy purposes. Xavier Worthy had an ankle swelling. He still put up 10 points in PPR formats. I think it's a low ankle sprain. You can't really play through a high ankle sprain. He had ankle swelling. Should be good next week. But Thornton put up some big numbers. He only put up 12 points, but 3 receptions on 90 yards ain't shabby. So any of those wide receivers are pretty decent flexes, other than Hollywood Brown, I guess. Jaylen Warren, he's back in practice with a brace. He's 8 days out from being ruled out last minute with an MCL injury likely. So I would think that he suits up this weekend. And aside from that, I think that's it. Ran through it. Let me know what you